Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books, number 54. The first book today is The News from Paraguay by Lily Tuck, 2004, or as they say in Espanol, Paraguay. We actually started last time, we were talking about this book, amazing book, and it's about the dictatorship of Franco Lopez in the late 1800s. He was in power from 1862 to 1870. He was a crazy guy, really crazy guy, and he started this war with Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay. He was trying to expand, the territory of Paraguay. And in that war, more than 90% of the men in Paraguay died. It was a disastrous war. One of the most, because Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. These were powerful countries in South America. So anyway, it's really something. This book it describes this, and the people of Paraguay are primarily Indians, and they were actually under the care of the Jesuit priests for a long time, the Jesuit order of Catholic priests. And this guy, I guess they were such a beaten down people and maybe depressed or for whatever reasons, they went along with it. I've never heard of a situation where, and more than 90%, and some say like the entire male population. It's debatable how many die. So this is really an incredible book, and very obviously tremendous, horribly tragic. The dictator's wife was from Ireland, and he courted her in Paris. So they had some money. He came from a wealthy family. And his common law wife, I guess they didn't get married. And the other thing is this book talks about the interesting animals in Paraguay, like parrots, alligators, and it's the Latin American politics of that time, greed and cruelty. And then so it's an amazing historical book, good history, and really makes you really feel like you're a part of it. This is not a dry history book. The author, Lily Tuck, I thought, wow, is she the reincarnation of his wife Ella Lynch? So I just think this is an amazing book, wonderful history book, and you really feel like you're a part of it. And you get to learn about an obscure country, Paraguay, in South America. Fascinating book. The next book is Safe at Home by Bob Musikowski, 2001. This is an incredible book. It's the author. His background is Irish and Polish. He's a European descent American, white guy, grandson of immigrants, and his father was a Brooklyn-raised factory worker. Now the author was raised in Bayonne, New Jersey, near Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty and Liberty Island, across the upper New York Bay from Brooklyn. His father was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan and a big New York Yankees hater. And of course, the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles, so he became a big New York Mets fan. The author was born in 1957. This is about his life. When he was age 7 years old, 1964, he went with his father to the Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C. during the Civil Rights Movement. So he remembered that. The author, Bob Musikowski, in high school and college was a tremendous athlete. And then after college, he became a very successful businessman. And then he descended into drug addiction and alcoholism, but he recovered, thankfully. Yeah, so he recovered from that. And so he did well, and he did well financially, and he decided he wanted to do some good. So he started a Little League baseball program in Chicago and New York City for inner-city troubled black and Hispanic kids. And he changed their lives through baseball. Made a big difference. He challenged white so-called Christians to be Christians and volunteer as coaches, umpires, and contributors. So he's a very, very brave, kind man, good guy. And, I love it because I love baseball. He was trying to help young people stay out of trouble through sports, getting them into playing baseball, this beautiful, peaceful game, great outdoors, and did a lot of good. Amazing book. And because, I think it's true. Sports can help young people. And he decided these young kids, troubled kids in New York and Chicago, they needed this. And so he he put a lot into it and made a difference. So wonderful job by, God bless, Bob Musikowski. Tremendous book. The next book is Flash for Freedom by George MacDonald Fraser, 1971. This is the third in a 12-book series by the author, and it's called The Flashman Papers. And this character, I read this. I came across this book at book sale at SM Centerpoint in Metro Manila, Philippines, and I read it. And, oh my gosh, this is really an incredible book, beyond superlatives. This character, it's a historical fiction, and this character, his name is Harry Flashman. He's British, and he has all these adventures around the world in the British Empire. And so I'm actually reading the first. I haven't read any of the others. I'm reading the first, but this is the third, Flash for Freedom. And he's a British soldier, and he after apparently in a previous book he had severe conflict with Otto von Bismarck in Germany. Well, that inspires me to read the previous two books to get into that, because Bismarck was a famous guy in world history. And so anyway, the Harry Flashman, they call him Flashman. He's a very brave man. He endured the horrors of war. He became disgusted with politicians. He was a real hero, yet he veered away into selfishness, alcohol, and his major weakness, sex. Now, the one drawback to these books is he's constantly, having these affairs with women, which complicate his life, which actually make the book entertaining, because leads to adventures, because he's always getting into trouble, because you're not supposed to do that. He's having affairs with married women or young women with fathers who really get mad at him. So he's always getting in trouble. He has a rich father-in-law, but a loveless marriage. In this book, he was playing cards with Benjamin Disraeli. Wow, interesting. He was one of the great prime ministers of Great Britain, a Jewish fellow. And in this card game, he was accused of cheating. Now, in this time, in the previous book, the one I'm actually reading, he became a hero in Afghanistan with the British Army. That's actually the first one. And so because he's a war hero and because of his family connections, he was expected to enter Parliament, which is what he wanted to do. However, he lost his temper in this card game, and he ended up murdering the accuser. I guess he got out a gun and shot and killed him. So he was in big trouble. Murder. You can't do stuff like that. It's terrible. He figures he's going to go to prison. So his friends helped him. They wanted to help him avoid prison time. So he didn't have many options. He was forced to board a slave trade ship. So he had to get out of the country. He got on this during the slave trade, and he sailed on this slave trade ship to Dahomey, which is now Benin, West Africa, and he encountered African female soldiers in an empire there and was nearly murdered. He helped transport African slaves to Honduras, where they were expected to be sold. And on the ship, he had one of these slaves was a woman who became his sex slave. Yeah. So anyway, so the thing is, this was they were illegally trading slaves because the slave trade actually had been banned. Slavery was still legal in the U.S. and other areas, but the slave trade had been banned, and but it was still lucrative. So people were doing it, and they got they got arrested, and their ship was stopped by the U.S. Navy, which was patrolling for these illegal slave traders, and by this time, I think most of the slaves had already been sold, but there were 6 females left. The rest had been sold in Honduras and in Rotan Island. Anyway, Captain Springer ordered the slaves to be chained and thrown overboard to eliminate the evidence. So I guess this is before the ship had been actually boarded they saw the U.S. Navy, and they didn't want to get in trouble. So they were going to kill these, chain the slaves so they could, and throw them overboard too. Terrible. So Flashman, he's kind of a rascal, but he's actually also is a good guy. So he got very upset. He didn't want to be a part of this. So he stopped this. And he got a stupid guy to shoot the captain, who had ordered this, massacre. Anyway, the whole crew was arrested, and because, they found this U.S. naval ship boarded their ship. And Flashman claimed he was a spy working for the anti-slavery movement. And he would make up stories, He was actually on this ship only because he got gotten in trouble in England. Anyway, but he was arrested, and he was trying to get out of, getting in trouble. He was shipped to Washington, D.C., and he told his tale to the American authorities there and met Abraham Lincoln, who was a young congressman. He was shipped back to New Orleans to testify in a trial for this slave trade business, and he escaped. So he's an outlaw in New Orleans, and he charmed a whorehouse madam, in other words, a house of prostitution, and he hid in this house of prostitution for a week to try to escape from the authorities. Finally, he left, and he was captured by abolitionists who can't remember the details. The people who were fighting against slavery, and they forced him. He had forced him to help move a talented slave in the Underground Railroad north to freedom. Then there's this quote: "Who has learned to die has learned how not to be a slave." King Gezu from Dahomey. And then so this was his mission to get this, to help this guy move north to freedom. He was kind of a difficult fellow, this African American guy. He was very, very talented. Anyway, Flashman, this book is like his diary. He writes about his experiences. And he talked about Abraham Lincoln, whom he had met in Washington, D.C. And he wrote this quote: "I liked Abe Lincoln from the moment I first noticed him. I think I liked him because for some reason, which God alone knows, he liked me. And not many men who knew me as well as he did have done that." Then he quotes Lincoln. During their meeting, Lincoln said this, quote, "Some of the greatest villains in history have been educated men. Without that education, they might have been honest citizens. A few years at college won't make a bad man virtuous. It will merely put the polish on his wickedness." And now, isn't that an interesting thing he's saying? That education, we've had a strong belief in education in our country and around the world, but that Lincoln's saying, well, there are problems with it. And again, it gets back to the spiritual aspect of life. That we have to be good people, and some people, they use their education to make trouble and to be criminals. And he continues, "It will merely a nation's criminal class is invariably composed of those who lack the benefits of education, and being uneducated, they get caught. Your learned rascal usually goes undetected. I speak as a politician who knows how difficult it is to fool people. It's difficult to fool all the people all the time. Negroes are the most confounded nuisance on this continent, not excepting the Democrats. I try to love my fellow man, with varying success, the poor slaves among the rest, but the truth is, I neither like nor dislike them more than any other creatures. There are moments, God forgive me, when I become just a little tired of Negroes. They are the rock on which our nation has been splitting for years. They could well assume the proportions of a national catastrophe, through no fault of their own, of course. I wish the whole parcel of them back in Africa. The slave question is much too serious a matter for emotion. My stock in trade is spoken words. Words can be obtained wholesale cheap. If you take them to the right market, you'll get rich. I've spent too long in courtrooms seeking after truth and seldom finding it. I'm a bit of a humbug myself and feel a kind of duty to other humbugs." So that was all a long visit with Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, so I liked what he talked about. That words. He says words can be obtained wholesale cheap, and then you can become rich if you find the right market for them. And very interesting. Anyway, so Harry Flashman had this guy, this slave, George Randolph, and his mission was to get him to freedom. And he was part of the abolitionists were trying to help slaves go north. And but the guy was difficult. He was very arrogant, and they get caught. Anyway, Flashman jumps the steamboat. I guess he'd been arrested again, and he has to work on a Arkansas farm to get money. He's driving slaves in the fields, so he has all these experiences. And then he has an affair with the farmer's wife. He was always doing this. This was his weakness, and he got caught. And he himself was forced into slavery. As a team with a female slave named Cassie, they escaped after she seduced and murdered the two men driving the slave wagon. So she could. A lot of men, their weakness is sex, and apparently she had done that. Anyway, so by this time, Flashman and Cassie, they're traveling together, and to fool people, they acted like he was the slave owner and she was the slave. And then he sells Cassie in Memphis, Tennessee for $3,000 and uses the money for clothes and steamboat tickets. Then she escapes from slavery, comes back with him. So that was their scam, to make money by selling her. So she's trying to make it to freedom. They travel up the Mississippi. They take the wrong boat to St. Louis, and they have to go back down to Cairo, Illinois, where my great-great-grandfather was in the Civil War. And then, Cairo, Illinois. And then they're on the Ohio River to past Louisville, Kentucky, and Cincinnati, Ohio. The steamboat has to stop because of the Ohio River ice near Portsmouth, Ohio. 3 miles short. And then the slave catchers are coming. Slave catchers, that was part of the process of when slaves were trying to make it free, make it to freedom in the North and in Canada. They crossed the Ohio River from Kentucky by jumping on big ice chunks. And then they went to this, they learned that Abraham Lincoln was actually in Portsmouth, Ohio, in a home. And they got to this home, and they were hoping that he would protect them. And so, because they knew that he was, against slavery. And these slave catchers came, and he defied them, so they left. And then there's other slave catcher who was a real bully came, because he was trying to, if you could catch a slave, you could make money. And so there's this amazing confrontation between Abraham Lincoln and this slave catcher. And then, so Lincoln again is quoted, "Use the law, courage. There's a law against forcing an entry in a private house. You'll just take them by force. Is that so?" See, this guy's coming in to get these slaves, but it is a private home. "That's your style, is it, Buck? Brute force and talk about it afterward." This is a wonderful confrontation between Lincoln and this slave catcher. "Buck, I don't like it. That's not how we do things where I come from. Since you won't listen to reason and believe that might is right, well, I'll just have to talk in your terms, won't I? So," and then Buck says, You hold your gab and stand aside, mister. Now I'm warning you fair." And then Lincoln says, "And I'm warning you, Buck." Lincoln's voice was suddenly sharp. "Oh, I know you. I know you, I reckon. You're a real hard-bark Kentucky boy, own brother to the smallpox, weaned on snake juice and grizzly hide, aren't you? You've killed more niggers than the dysentery, and your grandma can lick any white man in Tennessee. You talk big, step high, and do what you please. And if any legal beanpole in a store suit gets in your way, you'll cut him right down to size, won't you just? He's not a practical man, is he? But you are, Buck. When you've got your gang at your back, yes, sir, you're a practical man, all right. So am I, Buck, and more. For the benefit of any shirt-tail chaw-bacon with a big mouth, I'm a Hoosier boy from Indiana myself, and I put down better men than you just by spitting teeth at them. If you doubt it, come ahead. You want these people? You're going to take them? All right, Buck, you try it. Just try it." The rest of the world decided that Abraham Lincoln was a great orator after his speech at Gettysburg. I realized it much earlier. I remember the force in Lincoln's eyes. Through the open door came the distant sound of raised voices. Now these were abolitionists coming to they got news that there was an escaped slave, and they were coming to help Cassie. They were this was the beginning of the Civil War. The abolitionists against the slave catchers. And then Lincoln continued, "I doubt if that's the Kentucky militia. Better be going, Buck. In America, as in most places, it's only the truth that we find hard to believe, even when gratitude costs nothing. folks are reluctant to show it. They'll even pay hard money to avoid giving it where it's due. Strange but human, I suppose. There's a higher thing than the law, and it belongs in the conscience. And it says that evils such as slavery must be fought until the dragon is dead. And in that cause I hope I'll never stand back. If there's one thing can get my dander good and high, it's a big-mouthed Kentuckian hill rooster with his belly over his britches, and a sass me and see what happens look in his eye. And then he's talking to Flashman, and he says, God bless you for what you did for that girl. And then Flashman kind of wants to unburden himself about, the whole story. And then Lincoln doesn't want to hear it. He says, keep it for the recording, Angel. I'm a feeling you're going to need it. So anyway, so Cassie made it, this escaped slave, and she was taken to help cross Ohio to Canada and freedom, where the slave catchers couldn't go. Slave catchers could roam all over the North, but they couldn't go into Canada. And then Flashman was pressured by Lincoln to testify in the New Orleans trial, again the original trial of these of the slaves, that were on the slave ship. And supposedly, Harriet Beecher Stowe included the crossing of the icy Ohio River in Uncle Tom's Cabin, if you remember that scene where this character is trying to make it north and jumping from ice chunk to ice chunk. Flashman, after this, traveled by train to New York, and he took a boat back to New Orleans. He did not testify because he said he had the right to protect himself. This is in law because you have the right to remain silent. And he found Captain Spring, I think, who was, I can't remember who he is. He offered the spy papers for passage back to England on the slave ship. And in subsequent books, he had more adventures in the Crimea, Central Asia, India, China, came back to the U.S., and he met Abraham Lincoln again and Ulysses S. Grant. So, wow, what a book. What a series of books. And by George MacDonald Fraser. Incredible. The next book is Major League Dad by Tim Burke and Christine Burke with Greg Lewis, 1994. The author, Tim Burke, was a Major League Baseball relief pitcher from 1985 to 1992. He played for the Montreal Expos, the New York Mets, New York Yankees, and Cincinnati Reds. His brother and mother died when he was young, so he had hardships growing up. And then his wife Christine, her father had abandoned her family when she was young. So they had both had hardships, this Tim Burke and his wife. She broke her back in a bad car accident. Tim became an alcoholic. Oh, so they really had hard times. They met, got married, and became very strong Christians. Now, they couldn't have children because she couldn't get pregnant, so they adopted handicapped children from South Korea, 2 girls, and a boy from Guatemala, another boy from Vietnam. 1993, Burke retired because he had enough money and he wanted to be with his family because he could have played. But, the thing is, baseball players, they're gone so much. And he kind of felt like, wow, my kids need me at home. So, and I guess maybe he had enough money. He figured he could do something else. So he retired. That's an interesting story because, he walked away. A lot of these guys, from spring training in March till maybe in October. So that's that's like 7 months of the year. They're gone a lot. And so he wanted to be home for his children. Wonderful book. Really enjoyed it. The next book is The Life and Many Deaths of Harry Houdini by Ruth Brandon, 1993. This is an incredible book. The famous man, Harry Houdini. He was born Eric Weiss in 1874 in Budapest, Hungary. He died in 1926 in Detroit, Michigan in the United States at age 52. October 31, 1926, on Halloween. Harry Houdini moved to the United States as a boy with his family. So this book is about his life. He's a fascinating guy. He grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and New York City. The family moved around. And he had an amazing life. Appleton, I think that my good friends, Father Stan Plutz in the Philippines, was from Appleton, Wisconsin. But eventually they settled in New York City. And Harry, he as a career, he became a magician and an escape artist. Yeah, he he did real well, became real famous. He would have handcuffs, ropes, locks, and he would defeat them. He faced drowning, suffocation, dangerous heights. He was brave, physically strong, and determined, hardworking, self-absorbed, and a very deep love for his mother, very restless and ambitious. He was Jewish, very well-read, smart guy. He was haunted by the childhood trauma and poverty. And they immigrated. His father was a Jewish rabbi and became a failure in America, so they had trouble. And Houdini became an enemy of those who claimed to communicate with the dead. So Houdini, I know they would do these stunts where he would be, he would have a straitjacket on and tied and have tied with chains all over him. They'd put him in a safe and have this safe have chains around it, and we thrown it into New York City harbor, like even in very cold weather. And he was an escape artist. It was a big public spectacle. People would come to see if he could make it. Harry Houdini, fascinating, and he always did. I know my grandmother said he came to Regina, Saskatchewan, and walked a high wire, and again defied death. He would do these dangerous things, and so they made a recent movie not too long ago with Robert Downey Jr. Real good movie, and so Harry Houdini was a real famous guy years ago. People knew him very, very well because of these things that he do. They were very dangerous. He captured the public's attention and interest because of these death-defying stunts. Very often he'd be tied, and he figured stuff out. He was very strong physically and strong mentally, and of course he had his own secrets like these skeleton keys he'd have in his mouth, and he could wiggle out of stuff. I don't know how he did. He had these different things he could do, basically, and he had techniques along with his physical strength and the ability to hold. He could hold his breath for a long time. That also came in handy. And anyway, there's this a really amazing quote the author comes up with about shaman, and the author figures that Harry Houdini was a shaman, and she says this quote: "Figures of great power in most primitive societies. They can intercede with the powers of darkness because their life experience has been in some way extreme. Everyone has to cope with life's crises, starting with the separation at birth. The potential shaman has, for some reason, experienced these more intensely and has had to evolve special ways of dealing with the intensity of his or her experience. Shamans derive from the extremity of their experience a knowledge which is denied to most other people. They have journeyed from horror and madness through countless dangers to rebirth and joy. They are healers, psychologists, repositories of ancient wisdom." Well, we're going to have to continue next time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you find a good book to read, and God bless you. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you next time.